This is the Fatty Joe Show, coming to you from Casa de Carrie, deep in the forests of Nutmeggerville. This show is dedicated to exploring pathways to better health from a holistic perspective. In each episode, we will explore such topics as nutrition, mental and emotional health, fitness, and more. I'm Yogi, your host, and I became interested in studying health after conventional health dogma became damaging and led me to become massively overweight. Against modern convention, I went on a keto lifestyle and I lost over 300 pounds and gained a level of control on my personal health that I never had before. Now I'm on a journey to find out what is myth and what is truth in the ever-convoluted world of what is considered healthy. Come join me on a journey of discovery as I look for a path to improve total health. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/thefattyjoeshow or patreon.com/carriebrown. If you want to check out all of our social media links and recipes, head to carriebrown.com. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe to the show.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Fatty Joe Show. Today, my guest is Amy Berger from Tuit Nutrition. Her tagline is Keto Without the Crazy. She has a master's degree in human nutrition. She's certified nutrition specialist, Air Force veteran, has been low carb for 15 years, and specializes in diabetic therapy, PCOS, migraine, acid reflux and GERD, cardiovascular disease, neurological and neurodegenerative disorders. And she's also the author of the Alzheimer's Antidote and the Stall Slayer. And that is a pretty incredible resume. So I want to welcome you to the Fatty Joe Show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I'm a huge coffee junkie, so it's weird that I don't have a cup of Joe with me right now, but I just finished my morning coffee earlier. There you go. You have yours.
Yep. Yeah. I usually do my coffee in the morning, but if I do coffee too late, I can't sleep. Like I literally have to be like 8-9 hours away from coffee before I go to sleep. So I'm not one of those people that can drink caffeine and just right out. So, but we messaged a little bit back and forth on the email, and we talked about some different subjects to bring up. And the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about your company, Tuit Nutrition, and I want you to tell us about it and what you do and how it all works and comes into play.
Yeah, thanks. So my one woman shop, just my private nutrition practice, is Tuit Nutrition, and so tuitnutrition.com. Don't judge me by the website. I'm a little bit of a technology dinosaur. I need to completely overhaul the website, but the information on how to do a consultation and stuff is on the website. And I got into, doing nutrition professionally the way a lot of other people do. I was a career changer. I didn't study this in undergrad or anything, but I was heavier when I was younger. And I wasn't, I didn't have morbid obesity, but I was chubby. And I was chubby despite working out regularly, eating what I thought at the time was a healthy diet, my whole grain cereal with my skim milk and the whole 9 yards. And long story short, I discovered the Atkins diet. And I tried it because I had tried so many other things that did not work. And it worked. What can I say? It worked, and I never looked back. I get to eat really delicious foods and feel good and maintain a lower weight. And I just was so fascinated by, why is this working? How is this working? And I just independently started learning more and more about low carb and keto and all this. And I was in and out of a lot of jobs that I wasn't satisfied with. And it occurred to me, hey, nutrition, like nutritionist is a job. I could do that. And then I could help other people learn about this. So I went back to school to get formal training in nutrition. And now I do help other people. But over all these years that I've been learning about how this diet works and all the biochemistry of everything, weight loss at this point to me is one of the least impressive things that this way of eating can do. Like you mentioned earlier, it can help diabetes, it can help PCOS, migraine, fatty liver disease, all of these different things. And this one same way of eating is helpful for all of them. So, and I work with clients all over the US and even internationally, because now with Skype and Zoom and everything, location is really not a problem at all. So I'm based in North Carolina in the Raleigh-Durham area, but if anyone is anywhere else, I can work with pretty much anyone anywhere.
Yeah, the Raleigh-Durham area. So, are you originally from that area, or?
No, oh my God, no. I was born and raised in New York, and I am further south, like south of the Mason-Dixon line, than I ever thought I would be. But I'm dating somebody that lives down here,
Ah,
and I'm self-employed. A lot of my income, besides clients, I do a lot of freelance writing in health and nutrition and keto. So I could work from anywhere. I work from home, and he wasn't quite as mobile, so I am down here. And the winters are beautiful because they're very mild, but the summers it's brutal. It's brutal here in the summertime.
yeah. This summer up here in Connecticut was pretty tough with the heavy humidity and the high heat as well. I felt like I was in the tropics, and I know, North Carolina's got to be even a little bit more heavy in that area. So,
Yeah. I mean,
I
I can't complain. I'm inside most of the time in the air conditioning. If I'm ever outside in that heat and humidity, it's my choice, but still it's bad. But I
yeah.
think it's starting to get a little cooler now, first day of September we're recording, so
Yeah, the reason why I was asking about if you had come from North Carolina, because the South, and there is a very well, everywhere you go has a very strong food culture, but the South is very much very strong food culture that you don't really break away from traditions that much, and it can be very challenging for people in those type of cultural food traditions to actually go into keto. Being from New York, it seems like there would be more flexibility with how you think about eating because of more exposure to things. And not that New York doesn't have its food traditions, it definitely does. The Italian food, the pizza, a lot of the ethnic foods that are coming across. But it just seems that in certain areas, certain cultures, those cultural traditions of eating and eating certain foods is really much stronger than other areas.
yeah, that's true. I would say I don't see it as much personally, because most of the people who write to me for help are already doing low carb or keto, and they just need to troubleshoot. So they're already, they've already started to move away from the southern, the grits and mama's biscuits and all the sweet tea. There was I heard a doctor in the area say something like he had a patient and the food looked really good. Like the food journal was great, and the person wasn't losing weight. Like, what's the problem here? You're eating. Turns out the person didn't realize that the beverages also matter, and they were still drinking the sweet tea. And for those of you who are not from the South, sweet tea is iced tea, but it's like, do you want some tea with your sugar? So it's like, you could stand a spoon up in the glass because it's just so thick. But that's what sweet tea is. So
Right.
it's a very sugary culture down here, very heavy on
Mountain Dew.
the starch and the fat. Like I said, the grits, the biscuits, but it's also, an ethnic economic issue too. There's a lot more poverty in the South, and we can argue that certain foods are not that expensive. You could go to Walmart and get ground beef, and it's totally fine. But these people have to they have to learn that. We're not born knowing this stuff. So yeah, it's hard, but it's definitely low carb and keto are more out there than they ever were. So people are starting to come across it here and there.
Yeah, and with the low income areas, also one of the things that comes into play that people don't consider is not just you may be in a food desert, but also, especially in the South, sometimes it's quite a trek to get to the market. It's not just around the corner or down every other block. You got a Kroger's or something, and the markets, they may be a food desert when you go in, but also people, when they do go to the markets, they target those shelf stable goods that they can store, because they may not have, but one little tiny fridge, and they may not be able to get to the market that often. So they need food that isn't going to go bad quickly. And dried starches like flours and beans and things like that are something that's going to be more stable for them, that they can keep longer, as
Yeah.
well as inexpensive, and
Yeah.
a lot
It's
of
not,
processed foods.
yeah. It's very, some of us are fortunate in our incomes and our lives, but we have to keep in mind, not everybody has that capacity. Not every, you just say, oh, just order online, just order, from your fancy grass-fed beef and wild salmon place, and they'll deliver it to your door. Yeah, for $500. So it's, we have to be more inclusive and more realistic. But I think you're exactly right. But there's still ways to navigate it all and eat healthfully. But people have to know what to choose. It's still not just like they have to still have that knowledge of which things to buy. So it is a challenge for sure.
And this kind of plays into your tagline of Keto Without the Crazy, where you're trying to, one of the big things that you try to do is to teach people that to make the better choices, even if they can't make the best choices, and to take a lot of that stress and pressure away from eating a healthy diet. What's your approach to that, especially in some sort of area? How do you go about this?
Yeah, it took me a long time when I was brand new to this professionally. It took me a long time to figure out what is my voice, what is my niche. Because when you're fresh out of nutrition school, or you hang out your shingle and you're brand new, you want to be all things to all people. You want to help little kids with ADD, you want to help women with the autoimmune conditions, you want to help people with diabetes, you want to help everybody. And you learn pretty quickly that you can't specialize in everything. You have to focus, and then you have friends and colleagues that you can refer to other things. And over time, it kind of revealed itself that there is a huge need for somebody to uncomplicate this and simplify it and remind people of the core essence of what you need to do to make this work. And by this, I mean low carb or keto. Whether you're trying to lose weight or lower your blood sugar or your blood pressure or whatever. When I was new to this in like the year 2000, 2001, when I first started learning about all this, Facebook did not even exist. Reddit didn't exist. Twitter, YouTube, Instagram didn't exist. And there were like one or two books. There was the Atkins book and there was Protein Power. And it's a blessing and a curse to have so much more information now, because we have so much more information everywhere. But that means we have a lot more misinformation and a lot more useless, unnecessary stuff. And most of what I do with clients is bring them back to center, so to speak. Like, if you can afford the grass-fed beef, great. If you want to measure your ketones, great. Do you have to do any of that to be successful? No. You can eat the cheapest stuff, if all you can afford is what's on sale at the discount store, guess what? As long as it's really low in carbs, you're better off than eating the fanciest, organic, gluten-free, small batch, sugary cereal. So it's, I, having started where and when I did, it's almost incomprehensible to me how overly complicated and crazy keto has become, because you really only need to do one thing to start and get very far, and that's just eat very, very low carb. Everything else is just fluff. It's not meaningless, but it's not the most important thing.
Yeah, and also there's the aspect of sustainability, and we generally hear a lot of the especially if you're listening to podcasts or you're online, there are groups of people that will tell you, if you cannot get the grass-fed beef, then you might as well just go back to the sugary stuff. You might as well. And that's not really the case, because beef is going to be far better for you than that sugary cereal ever will be. And no matter how much it is chemically fortified with artificial vitamins and minerals and things, that beef is going to be far better for you. And the same thing with chicken to a lesser extent. But if you can't afford that, it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, there's a lot of like food purity, for lack of a better word, thinking that has seeped into low carb and keto. And again, when I was new, the Atkins book, and I know for whatever reason, Atkins has gotten a bad reputation in the keto world. People will say, oh, I'm not doing Atkins, I'm doing keto. Like, okay, do you understand that the new version of keto that's out there now is the Atkins diet wrapped up in a shiny new bow? So that's first of all. Second of all, Dr. Atkins was an absolutely brilliant, brilliant man. I've gotten to know some people that worked with him for a few decades, and he was so far ahead of his time. But anyway, my point is, in his books, there's not one word about the grass-fed beef, or you're going to die if your ranch dressing is made with soybean oil, or there's not even anything about fasting. You don't have to fast. Like, it's just, if you are living with something like morbid obesity or type 2 diabetes or hypertension or out of control I said hypertension, right? I mean, cardiovascular disease, whatever. The number one most important thing is keeping your carbs low. If you have the finances to support local farming and food that's produced a certain way, by all means do it. But if you don't have the means to do that, you will still get great results. And I know this because the doctors using keto in their practices see this every day. Not every patient is, some of the doctors I know are still in regular clinics. They see indigent patients, they see patients on Medicare and Medicaid who they're not going to go to Whole Foods. They're not going to order from some of these fancy markets that ship through the mail. Like, and they do just fine. They get results just as good as anybody. And there's only sustainability. Some people are going to love the complication and micromanaging every detail, but if that's going to make it harder for someone to do this for 20, 30 years, don't worry about those crazy details, because you don't need to.
Especially right now, a lot of this stuff could be challenging. We're experiencing a time where there is some issues with the supply chain in the country because of the whole COVID and quarantine thing. People are working at home, which means they're buying stuff from the store. Restaurants are closed down, so they're going to the supermarket more. So they're consuming more things at the supermarkets. The supermarkets weren't prepared for it. So people are having a hard time getting the items that they need. And this is something I relate to because I was part of the supply chain as a truck driver. But as a truck driver, I had a hard time accessing the supply chain for myself. So you're in an area, Raleigh's not necessarily that rural, but there are some rural areas around Raleigh. And do you work with a lot of people that have issues accessing the supply chain in certain ways, or have you experienced or seen that at all?
I can't speak to that very much, because most of the people most of my clients are distance. It's very, very rare that I get someone actually from the local area. I think most people find me online. But I actually work at a local farm in a town about 30 minutes west I'm in Durham, which is just a little bit outside Raleigh, like 30 minutes west of here. And our farm, during this virus time, business has been better than ever. And I think it's partly because our supply chain is much, much smaller, right? We raise the animals on our farm, we raise the produce, and we just sell it. And the abattoir or whatever, like the meat processors that we go to are local and much, much smaller. They're not these places that do thousands of head of cattle or pork every day. And so our supply was never really interrupted. And so there's people that we have a lot of new customers because they weren't able to get certain things at the supermarket. So they started looking for other outlets to get food. But a farm like this, the food is kind of expensive. It's the whole pastured, grass-fed, free range, the whole 9 yards. And so definitely not everyone can afford that. So the people that can afford it have been, I think, turning toward these alternative sources, so to speak. But the other people, I think there are a lot of people relying on, convenience foods that they might not otherwise quite eat so much of in a time like this, just because it's easy, it's available, it's cheap. And I had, again, one of my doctor friends was saying that over these last few months, and he's a keto specialist, some of his patients are doing better than they used to be because they're cooking more at home, right? And when you cook at home, you control the ingredients a little better. You probably won't eat quite as much as the restaurant, they bring you 2 days worth of food for dinner. And then, but at the same time, other patients are doing worse because they're cooking at home. Like if you just don't have cooking skills and you're going to get whatever, whereas at a restaurant, you can order a steak and broccoli or a pork chop and grilled asparagus. So it just depends on the cooking knowledge or just what people are inclined to do at home. People, some are doing worse, some are doing better.
Yeah, that's something that Carrie and I have actually experienced a lot. Carrie runs a lot of cooking classes online, and we get people in like her ice cream class or her soup class, and they've never heard of like how to zest a lemon, how to, and these are what a lot of people consider very basic skills, but because people have never been taught, they're ignorant of these skills. They don't understand what's going on because nobody ever showed them. And with our current society, with the fact that we are constantly, most of us in a hustle and bustle mode, eating out constantly, less and less people cook for themselves. So we've started running some basic cooking videos on our YouTube on how to do these basic skills to help people out. But what are some of the things that, when you're working with people, I assume you work for people with a wide variety of backgrounds, being that you're working with people global. What's the percentage of people not exact number, but about that you have to really work with to get the basic skills, cooking skills, to make this thing more accessible to them?
It's a pretty good mix. Some people are like practically gourmet chefs. They're already cooking all their own food. They just need to start cooking low carb food. Some of them, on my client intake forms, I have a question that says something like, what percentage of your food is home cooked? Some of it's 99%, some of it's 20%. So, but the thing is, if you don't have cooking skills and you don't want to cook, because some people want to and they don't know how, some people have no desire to do it, you can actually be 100% successful on keto, dining out every day, as long as you know what to order. You have to really be careful about what you order, or you could even do it with convenience foods, like go to a supermarket, get everything prepared, get a rotisserie chicken, get the, shaved Brussels sprout salad from the deli counter, get deli roast beef. You can do it. I don't love people to do it that way. I'd rather they cook more of their own food, but you certainly can. And I try to explain to people, you don't need fancy cooking skills. I love to cook, and even so, many of my meals are like a glass Pyrex baking dish, one dish. I could put a pork chop or two in, season them up with whatever, salt, curry powder, cumin, anything that's handy. And, chop up some zucchini, some onions, whatever. One dish, stick it in the oven, 350 for 30 minutes, and dinner's ready. Like, to me, that's almost not even cooking. It's putting stuff in the oven. And so it's so much easier than people think it is. And I love, like I'm pointing right over there, my bookshelf. I have a ton of fancy, gorgeous, full color keto cookbooks. I very, very rarely actually make any of the recipes. I like to look at them. I like ideas. It's my food porn. I'm not going to lie. I love looking at the pictures, but my meals are very simple. Lunch could be a can of tuna with some mayo or olive oil and green pepper raw cut up into strips. Like not every meal has to be. Now, it's easy for me to say that I live alone. I don't have kids. If you have to cook for a picky family, it's a little bit harder, but just because some of these keto cookbooks have, crown rack of lamb with cauliflower mash and cilantro rice and whatever, you can do that if you want to, or you can stick a chicken leg and some cauliflower in the oven for 30 minutes and call it good.
Yeah. And we, on our messages, you had mentioned online, because when I sent you my description of who I was, so you knew who you were talking to when you came on, I wrote that I was a truck driver, and you said, well, that's great. Let's talk about, truck driving and how you can get your food and cook on the truck and all that. And I think that's a great subject that we can raise. And I want to say to the audience that what we are going to relate, we're going to have a quick conversation about accessibility. But if you're in a small space, if you're in an RV, a tiny home, even a small studio apartment, a lot about what we're going to talk, I just have to preface this real quick. A lot about what we're going to talk about can definitely apply to your situation as well as it would a truck driver like I was formerly. So you had some ideas about how somebody on the road, like a truck driver, can prepare their meals and shop and get things on a budget and maintain keto. And I'd love for you to relate these.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously I don't have any trucking experience. I don't have any long range, being on the road experience, but I think, and I gotta caveat this, I'm not a food safety expert, but I think one of the things I tell people is food doesn't spoil anywhere near as quickly as we think it does. So if you're in a situation where there's no refrigeration, or maybe you don't even have a cooler, you could stop, go into a supermarket for 10 or 15 minutes, get a pound or two of deli roast beef, half a pound of sliced cheese, maybe a rotisserie chicken. Some of these not that they're not non-perishable, things that you don't have to cook. They're already made, but they're perfectly low carb, and you can keep them on the seat next to you or on the floor, maybe not in the direct sunlight if it's the dead of summer, but get these things that are already made. They sell now canned fish in a pop top can. You don't even have to have a can opener handy, right? Or like in pouches. And again, so this is like getting over that food purity. Is deli counter lunch meat perfectly acceptable? Yeah. Stay away from the things that are obviously sugary, like, honey baked ham and brown sugar turkey or whatever. But I think that's one way to do it. And I mean, this doesn't apply to a truck, but somebody in a very small space, if you have even enough counter space to put a slow cooker, slow cooker is your best friend. Cook a giant piece of meat, a 4 or 5 pound roast of beef or pork or something, vegetables. You can eat that for 3 or 4 days. Now, you might, depending on your situation, you might need refrigeration, but that's another point that I make to clients. Cook in bulk. Cook in huge amounts. I mean, I'm one person, and I still will often cook a large amount of stuff because then it's ready to go. I can grab it. I can eat it cold. That's something we all have to get over our mindset too. Not everything needs to be hot when you eat it. It's okay to eat a steak sliced up cold, dipped into guacamole or dip it in ranch dressing.
Pop it on a salad.
Yeah, on a salad. I mean, I always tell people, if you're going to go to the bother of grilling a steak or grilling some chicken breast, don't grill one or two, grill 6 or 8. And that way you have one for dinner. Everything's ready. The next morning you can cut it up and put it in an omelet or slice it up, put it on a salad, put it into chili 2 days later. Because if you're grilling, or again, sticking something like a cookie tray, not that we're making cookies, but using a baking tray to put meat into the oven, it doesn't take any more time to cook a large amount than it does a small amount. You're going to be turning the oven on anyway, turning the grill on anyway. Cover the thing with food. I just think there are a lot of very good options to grab if you're on the road. I know truckers like time is money. Like, you don't want to be in a supermarket for an hour, but if 15 minutes, run to the deli counter, get some stuff, and go to the self checkout and be out. But I don't know. I'm assuming you guys have coolers, and guys and gals, there's lady truckers out there.
Yeah.
Like a cooler or something. I don't know. Some trucks also come equipped with some kind of heating element too?
Well, maybe not the heating. Well, some trucks have microwaves, but a trucker's situation can be varied based on whether or not they own their own truck and if they're a company driver, and what the company provides. For myself, when I first started, I had a thermoelectric cooler that I went and picked up, and I used a slow cooker. I had some basic stuff, and I had a couple different kinds of slow cookers. For us drivers, and this is something that even if you commute to work and you're in your car and you're going to let's say a construction site, or you travel a lot and you stay in hotels, there's this little device called a lunchbox oven, and it's a mini slow cooker that you can put little baking trays in, and you can make little roasts, chickens, and things. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. Eggs were my friend. I used a lot of eggs, and eggs can actually sit outside of refrigeration for quite a while without going bad, as long as they're not cracked.
This kind of stuff freaks people out. But you just have to kind of change the way you think about all this. It's such an important point, is that things don't go bad as quickly as we think they do.
And the main issue for truck driving and people in small spaces and RVs or even tiny studio apartments is often your main issue is refrigerated storage. So you cannot, bulk cooking can be a challenge because you can only fit so much into your things, but you can still bulk cook, but you may not be able to bulk cook on the level that other people would. I did a lot of cooking in my truck. I had, at one point, I stepped up. I have a Ninja foodie, so I was able to do all kinds of cool stuff. I used camp stoves. Everything that I used in the truck, you could use in one of these situations. One of the most accessible, easy, portable things that you can get is a lunchbox oven, or another type of oven that works in a very similar way called a Hot Logic. And these are very transportable. The Hot Logics come in actually different sizes. You could even get a family size. And you could plug these in basically the cigarette lighter adapter and drive, and it'll cook as you drive. But as you were saying, the slow cookers is a great entry-level tool for anybody to cook. And if you're in a hurry and you're a driver, you could actually go into the store, grab a lump of meat, grab some pre-cut vegetables, some seasoning, dump it all in your slow cooker, and drive down the road, and you'll have your food cooking. So that same method could actually apply in studio apartments, the RVs, and other small living areas as well. And it is a regular home as well, too. If you don't have a whole lot of time to cook and you're not at home and all that often, dump and go methods are fantastic.
Yeah. Honestly, every time I don't use my slow cooker that often, but every time I do use it, I'm like, oh my, this is so great. Why don't I use this more often? And then I don't learn my lesson and use it more often. But it's very hard to mess something up in a slow cooker. Very hard to mess up.
It is, especially if you're using a fattier cut of meat. If you are using a meat that has less fat, you're going to have to add more moisture, more fat to it, so that it doesn't dry out. But the slow cookers can be very forgiving, more forgiving than the pressure cookers, more forgiving than the air fryers, definitely. So it's a great way to go.
Yeah.
Now, you are an author as well, and one of your specialties, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart, near and dear to Carrie's heart, is brain health. And you've written a book called The Alzheimer's Antidote, and you specialize in helping people with neurological and neurodegenerative disorders. So first, can you tell us a little bit about your book, and also how you work with people as far as nutrition goes to help their brain function, or to stop or stall a decline in brain function?
Sure. So my book is called The Alzheimer's Antidote. And if people out there are wondering, well, why is a keto nutrition person writing about Alzheimer's disease, they meaning the experts, the scientific authorities and researchers, regularly refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes, or diabetes of the brain. And where that comes from is that the main problem in the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's is that the neurons in the brain are not taking up and using glucose properly. And they convert glucose into energy. And they're not doing this properly. So they're basically starving. They're not able to get enough energy. It's like a fuel shortage in the brain. And there's some very, very promising research that shows that when these cells are, for whatever reason, not able to get energy from glucose, they can still take up and get energy from ketones. And, chronic, we know that type 2 diabetes is a risk factor for Alzheimer's, but even if your blood sugar is normal, so you don't have diabetes, your blood sugar is normal, but if you have chronically high insulin, that's also a major, major risk factor for Alzheimer's, regardless of your genes, regardless of your family history. So it is, in my opinion, looking very much like Alzheimer's is yet another one of these cardiometabolic illnesses that come from a lifetime of what I would call nutritional insult, to the brain of just, we know that chronically high blood sugar and insulin really have a negative impact on just about every single organ and tissue and gland in the body. Why would the brain not be affected? Well, it is affected. It's affected really badly. And so, keto, there's many, many reasons why keto, you know, could be beneficial for the brain, and providing ketones as fuel is only one of them. It's like the number one. Like, if the main problem in Alzheimer's is that these cells are starving to death, can we give them some fuel? Can we give them some other fuel besides glucose that they will take up and use? And I just gave a talk recently for Low Carb USA. In my Alzheimer's book came out about 3 years ago, and in the years since then, I've learned that there's a lot of overlap in the underlying biochemical mechanisms between Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and some other neurodegenerative and neurological conditions. And more research is actually being done right now looking at keto for all of these conditions.
Yeah, I've seen some of the research that it was one of the things that encouraged me to go on keto in the first place. But I saw some of the research that Dr. Dominic D'Agostino was doing with traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and the keto diet, low carb diet. And PTSD is in many ways another form of a degenerative brain disorder, because if it's not treated well, it can get worse and worse over time. And sometimes the damage that is done earlier will not display itself until years down the road when certain neural pathways and things break down. And his research, he was showing that if somebody after a traumatic brain injury was given a like C8 MCT oil or an exogenous ketone right away, they had less of a chance to have permanent damage done to their brain.
Yeah, most of the research I've seen with ketones, like you said, exogenous ketones or MCT, has been in animals, like mostly in rats and mice. But it's so promising, and one of the lead researchers in this area has, in looking at her research, it makes sense that the sooner you provide those ketones, the better, because you might, not right, we don't know anything for sure, you might be able to prevent some of the more widespread damage that would happen in the absence of having this other fuel that kind of gives the body a rest, so to speak. And I think it's scary to think that, like, what if this really has this kind of potential, but it's not being, I mean, I'm a veteran, right? It's not being used yet on the battlefield. You would think this is something you would want to have happen the second a service member comes into the field hospital. Don't give them the glucose or the dextrose drip, give them a ketone drip, get immediately, because what happens, let's say this person had a TBI or something, or not even a veteran, it could be an athlete, whatever, or anyone, could be in a car accident or something. They have this injury, they had the standard treatment for however long, 3 months, 6 months, then they learn about keto. How much better could the effect have been if they were doing keto from minute one, like if this was the standard of care? And I mean, we don't have enough solid data to say that this should be the standard of care, but I think it's so promising. It's so promising, and for numerous reasons. And like that, just giving the ketones is only one of them. I mean, for PTSD, or even keto is, they're looking at it for schizophrenia, anxiety, bipolar, depression, all of these mental health things for reasons other than the ketones, right? It raises levels of something called GABA, which is the most calming neurotransmitter. It helps regulate the ion, like electrolyte gradients, which that's why it's partly so helpful for seizures and migraines, and that could be influential for panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I mean, I don't want to get like too deep in the weeds, but it's this one diet, or giving
Well,
ketones,
we could
that
hide out in the weeds. Let's go. Let's go for it.
it's one thing that has so many different beneficial effects in so many different ways. And the thing is, I think giving ketones or giving MCT oil to raise ketone levels is helpful, but the diet induces a lot of other biochemical changes that just giving the ketones doesn't accomplish. So I think like especially in Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something, if you have somebody that is not able to do a ketogenic diet, or doesn't have the capacity to do it, give them ketones any way you can. Give them the MCT oil, give them the exogenous ketones. But in somebody who is willing and able to make the change to their diet, do that, because that's going to have a lot of effects that just giving the ketones doesn't.
Yeah, the isolation of certain nutrients can have a positive effect, but the more we're learning that nutrients have a synergistic relationship with other nutrients, and then when you give an isolate to somebody, whether even it's a macronutrient or a micronutrient, you're not getting the full effects.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, is these individual nutrients, but I think it's even more the underlying hormonal and biochemical state. Like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, it's looking more and more like the chronically high blood sugar or insulin is a huge factor. And so we want to correct that. We want to correct the metabolic situation, and then just the different signaling things that happen when, you know, keto is so good for lowering insulin levels. And hormones are like a spider web. You can't just touch one. You affect one, and everything else kind of changes a little bit too, right? So by doing that, I think keto has a lot of other effects that's unrelated necessarily to like the protein, fat, carb. I mean, it's related in that when the carbs are really low, the insulin is low, and then all of these other beneficial things start to happen, like inflammation goes down. Just so many. It's so promising because there's not a whole lot else to help. The
Right.
drugs, like at least for the neurological and neurodegenerative disorders, sometimes the side effects of the drugs are worse than the disease you're trying to treat. So, and TBI also, there's only, those drugs are only so effective to a point, and then there's no help beyond that for these people.
Yeah, and you being a Air Force veteran, and you could probably speak to this more than I have, but I've seen some of the supplied food to our soldiers and our military personnel, and even by the standard American diet, it's pretty low as far as quality goes. And we're right now in a position where a large number of our military personnel are actually becoming too unhealthy to serve. And a lot of it seems to be related to the diet. I mean, if you look at an MRE, it's a lot of fat in there, but it's just a high amount of carbohydrates and the most junk food they had. There is a movement, and also one that's led by Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, to change the diet, and the Air Force is actually kind of leading the way in this. The Air Force and the Navy as well. They're finding that putting the flight personnel on a ketogenic diet is improving response time and performance, and putting Navy divers on a ketogenic diet is improving decompression illnesses and other types of conditions that are associated with atmospheric changes, which can affect the brain.
Yeah, I mean, that's how Dom D'Agostino actually got into the whole keto thing. He started doing research with the Navy divers, and they were looking to prevent oxygen toxicity seizures, and that's how he got into keto, which is, totally, who would have thought. But yeah, I mean, MREs are just a disaster, but that most people don't live on MREs unless you're in a forward situation or where there's no food. They are a disaster, but it's there's a doctor, Mark Cucuzella, who is, an MD, but he's also an Air Force guy, that he is one of the people leading the way in trying to get the diet, even at basic training, changed. Because there was an admiral, I think a couple of years ago, gave a YouTube talk basically saying that our health right now, the compromised health of young people, is a national security crisis because we
Yeah.
don't have enough young people that are fit enough, strong enough, and lean enough. Not that you have to be lean to, like, be a good soldier or airman or something, but people who are not well enough to serve. They don't have the mobility or whatever. And it's funny because I think a lot of the nutritional information we have now, especially regarding specific vitamins and minerals, was done around, if I'm not mistaken, World War II. Maybe it was World War I, but I think it was World War II, when all of these soldiers showed up to be evaluated to serve, and most of them were undernourished,
Right.
underweight, sick, debilitated. Now we have the opposite problem. It's what they call it, overfed but undernourished, right? There's
Right.
plenty of calories. We're not hurting for energy. We're hurting for nutrients. We're hurting for, good health. And when I got out of the military, I've been out a long time now already, but I think being overweight is the number one reason people were being separated from the Air Force. Like, just there is a weight standard, and they'll give you some coaching, they'll give you some chances to get your weight under control. But if you can't, sorry, you're out. And it's depending on where you are in the military, there's a lot of different eating situations. If you are at a regular duty station and you're stateside, it's kind of like an office job in that you go to work, you have a schedule, and you go home. And if you go home, you can cook your food just like everybody else does. You go to even the commissary, the food is cheaper. So, or you can go to the local grocery store. You have no obstacle that anyone else doesn't have. If you are beholden to a dining facility or a chow hall, then you can only eat what's on offer, but there's always something suitable, but you have to know what to choose. You have to avoid the bread and the fettuccine and this and that. And there's always burger patties, there's always grilled chicken, there's always, well, sometimes there's a salad bar. So there's no shortage of junk and garbage, but there are suitable choices, but you have to have the mindset to avoid 88% of what's there and go for the 12% that's that's suitable
Yeah.
for low carb.
Yeah. And kind of still in the brain health, one of the other things that you specialize in is helping people cope with migraines using the ketogenic diet. And uh, I was recently listening to a talk, and I can't think of the lady's name, but she was talking about migraines and about how they are stimulated possibly by an energy deficit in the brain. Is that something that you see with the migraines? Because I know this is something that a lot of people suffer from, and there's still some contention in the medical industry of whether or not migraines are a real thing, and the people who suffer from the migraines aren't necessarily getting the attention and help they need from the medical industry.
Yeah, I don't specialize in migraine, but I'm guessing the woman you listen to is probably Angela Stanton.
I think
She's
so.
like the go-to expert on keto for migraine. So if anyone ever contacts me for help with migraine, I refer to Angela because she's like the person. But yeah, there's wild fluctuations in blood sugar and insulin can also trigger a migraine. Wild fluctuations, because that also contributes, I mentioned earlier, the electrolyte balance in the brain can trigger a migraine or a seizure. And the thing is, the reason I don't really do a lot with migraine is because for some people, just sort of garden variety regular keto is perfect and it works. Some people need migraine is like a very specific thing. They have to be really diligent about sodium. people with migraines need a lot more sodium than normal or than average, a lot more magnesium. There's other specific things that she has people do that tend to work better than just, keeping carbs really low. But it's powerful because for some people there are certain medications that work and it's fine. There's a lot of people with chronic migraine that drugs don't do anything. And so why wouldn't you at least give keto a try? They're so debilitating, and they are considered a neurological phenomenon. So to the extent that keto is really good for the brain and the nervous system, why not try it?
Yeah, and the brain is still really an undiscovered, as the human body is, but the brain especially is still a very much an undiscovered country in the medical world, in the scientific world. There's still so much we don't understand. I mean, not too long ago, scientists postulated that they may have found a new organ in the body. And how long have we been studying it? And we're like, oh, hey, what's that for? We just recently kind of started figuring out what the appendix might be for, and we thought it was just a throwback organ that didn't do anything anymore. And now we're like, oh, wait a minute, now it actually might do something. So there's still a lot we don't understand. And to know that somebody is actually working in this area to help people with such a maligned and misunderstood condition is really great. And I'm glad to see that you're working on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just learned about it. Angela's really she's the main person.
But you're providing some therapies that seem to be effective with a lot of people in your dietary practice.
Oh yes, in general.
Yeah,
I hope so anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they'll let you know, because I've seen some migraines in action, and it could be really tough.
Yeah, and I think keto is definitely starting to become more well known, but a lot of these things come from the ground up. They come from the patients bringing it up with their doctor or starting to share stories among themselves on the Facebook groups, on all the forums, and eventually the numbers are so big that doctors and researchers can't ignore it anymore. When the first time somebody comes to your office and says, well, I did keto and my migraines are gone, or I did keto and this went away, like, oh, okay, just keep doing that crazy diet, whatever. Then the 10th time they hear it, then the 50th time they hear it, oh, maybe I should start looking into this keto thing. And I think I'm stealing this from Dr. Ken Berry. He says, don't hide if keto has done something helpful for you, or carnivore diet or whatever, because maybe you're the first time the doctor's hearing it, or maybe you are that 50th person that's going to tip that doctor over into actually starting to look at this stuff. But I think part of the reason that this diet is not looked at more in just conventional medical offices, and I can't blame the doctors. It has to be, I mean, they're not learning about it in medical school, that's number one. But number two, it has to be difficult to even entertain the possibility that something as mysterious and terrible and complex seeming as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's could be helped with a diet, or something as untreatable as chronic migraine could be treatable with a diet. Like it's probably hard to believe that, but if you are one of the many hundreds or thousands of people out there who've had a life transformation with keto, then you do believe it because you know it works.
Yeah, it's a lot of people associate keto with a cure-all too, because so many conditions in our modern society stem from lifestyle issues and overconsumption of empty calories, high sugar, more sugar than we've really ever gotten in history, unless you were wealthy. And we've even seen a shift in the lifestyle illnesses that used to be the illnesses of affluence, the type 2 diabetes, the some of the neurological disorders, and now they are becoming the illnesses of the masses. So it's no wonder that people assume that this diet is a cure-all, because it does help with so many things. I want to preface that it isn't a cure-all. There are some things that you do need extra therapy, extra intervention for, but yeah, there's so much. Before we switch over, because I want to briefly talk about your other book as well, because it's something, and I may have to bring you on to talk about this one more in depth, because I could talk to you about a lot of stuff, and we kind of went down the rabbit hole on the brain one. But you also work with people with PCOS, and this is something that we're hearing more and more about in society now, but it wasn't something that was really talked about before. So can you break down PCOS and what it is, and how possibly the keto diet can help people with it?
Yeah, so I can send you some links. If you have show notes, I have a blog post on this and I did a video on it. PCOS, I once heard somebody call it diabetes of the ovaries. And I know we said Alzheimer's, diabetes of the brain. You start to sound like a broken record, but these conditions do come from either chronically high blood sugar or insulin. And in PCOS, this is where it's so important to emphasize that it's the insulin, not the glucose. Because if you are a woman out there listening and you have PCOS, or you think you do, but your blood sugar is normal, your doctor's never told you that you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, you need to get your insulin tested. Because like I said earlier, insulin is one hormone, but you can't just have something happen to one hormone by itself. It affects all these other hormones. When insulin is out of whack, it affects your luteinizing hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone, your testosterone, your sex hormone, binding globulin, all of these other things that are out of balance in PCOS. And I've heard, out there on the interwebs, people that don't know what the driving force of PCOS is will say something like, I have a higher risk of metabolic syndrome because I have PCOS, or I'm at greater risk for diabetes because I have PCOS. And it's actually it's a 180 from that. You have PCOS because you already have metabolic syndrome, whether you know it or not. You have PCOS because you have chronically high insulin. It's the chronically high insulin, it's the metabolic dysregulation causing the PCOS, not the other way around. And I did just use the word cause. In nutrition and health, we almost always hear that wishy-washy word, such and such is associated with X condition, right? This is associated with. I am quoting from the medical literature, from the published papers. They say that the chronically high insulin is a causal factor in PCOS. And the only reason so many women don't know is because doctors just don't test insulin. And in the blog post, hopefully we can link to that, I explain all of the hormonal mechanisms as to why women with PCOS either don't ovulate or have irregular ovulation. A lot of them start to grow facial hair, acne, weight gain, especially around the middle, like they take on a more manly hormonal profile because they have elevated testosterone. So it's so, I actually just, is it right here? Look, it's right here. I just printed this out this morning to read. Can you see it? Effects of a ketogenic diet in overweight women with polycystic ovary syndrome.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they do studies, and guess what? The hormones normalize, they get much, much better within just a few weeks. This isn't something that takes 6 months to show an effect. There was, Dr. Eric Westman did a pilot study on PCOS years ago, maybe like 15 years ago at this point, or 10 years ago. And it was only a small study, but 2 of the women, and PCOS is one of the leading causes of infertility among women these days in the, sort of industrialized world. 2 of the women got pregnant during the study. And it was a ketogenic diet for PCOS, and 2 of them conceived children. So it's very heartening. I can't promise, it's not like keto is a magic cure for PCOS, but it's stunning how quickly some of those hormones start to normalize and good things start to happen in keto for PCOS.
That seems to be a common theme amongst women in keto, is once they start keto, they get their fertility comes back. And there seems to be, the potential of we might have a keto boomer generation.
That would be, I mean, I do know that would be funny, but there's like these keto oops babies, like women that
Yeah.
thought they were long past their prime or who had been told you'll never conceive and they do keto and they don't know that keto might help correct that so they don't use protection and you know.
Yeah, and I know for women especially, things are challenging in the health field of learning about things like PCOS because of the lack of research into women's health that has occurred for centuries. Because they viewed, they would study men and apply what they learned about men's health to women and not think there's any difference. And I know things are starting to change now. Women are more part of research and we're starting to understand, but it seems like it's still very backwards compared to the knowledge we know about men's functions compared to women's functions
Yeah, I
in
mean
biology.
that's a good point. It's a bias in healthcare where, like a heart attack, for example, some of the symptoms in a woman are different from the symptoms in a man. Like the women don't tend to get that crushing chest pain like a man does. Um, and I would say there's also a ton of racial stigma in healthcare. Like I just came across this fascinating thread on Twitter of an African American dermatologist who created his own booklet about how certain skin conditions look on darker skin. Because you go through medical school and all the textbooks showing the pictures of these things aren't white people. And he's like, what does this look like on someone with darker skin? And of course, I've been meaning to do a video about this sometime. There is a huge amount of bias against heavy people in medical care, in healthcare, in just sort of assuming you're just lazy, you're undisciplined, and putting every issue they have down to their weight. Oh, you broke your elbow? Well, you need to lose weight. You have a hangnail, you need to lose weight. Things that are totally unrelated to the weight, the medical professionals always just want to put that on the weight. There's a lot of, and I don't mean to badmouth doctors. I mean, there's a lot of great doctors out there too, but there's a lot of unfounded assumptions in medicine.
Well, we also tend to think of generalized terms of when it comes to health, and even amongst the same sex, the same ethnic background, you could have the same symptoms that are caused by radically different conditions, and you can have widely differing symptoms that are caused by the same condition in people. So we do tend to think in generalized terms, though, when it comes to diet, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to anything, that if it works for somebody, it better work for everybody else. And that's also a bit of the problem. And people are more complex. And I would make the argument that women are even far more complex than that of men when it comes to systems, because there's a lot more going on than in a lot of men's
want you to
systems.
think we're more complex. I think that's true to some extent, but I'm glad you mentioned this because you said something earlier that I wanted to comment on, and that was how keto is not a cure-all. And I've had, how you were saying that different people can have the same problem and have different symptoms, or have the same symptoms and have very different underlying causes. Keto is so helpful for so many things, but there's certain things that keto by itself is not enough. And like the migraine is one of them. Even epilepsy, the ketogenic diet, the medical ketogenic diet, was actually originally developed to treat epilepsy before they had anti-seizure drugs. And I recently met one of the world's leading experts. His name is Eric Kosoff. And I asked him what percentage of people with epilepsy do keto and it doesn't help. And he said about 50%. So, and that was stunning, shocking to me. I knew I knew it wasn't effective for 100% of people, but I thought it was more than 50%.
Yeah.
But the real point I want to make is that I've had clients where the problems they're having are not dietary. They'll come to me, they give me a food log or whatever. They eat better than I do. And I'll say, this isn't a diet problem. You you need a divorce, or you need a new job, or you need a babysitter and a night off twice a month. Like, there's people, they're trying to fix non-diet problems by changing their diet. And if your problem isn't because of what you're eating, then changing what you're eating isn't going to fix the problem. And I mean, that's pretty rare. Most people do come to me and they need help with the food, but don't, to people listening and watching out there, I don't know, don't limit yourself like, oh, if I just keto harder, or if I just lose more weight, or if I just tweak my diet. If you're trapped in an unhappy marriage, keto isn't going to fix that. If you hate your job, keto doesn't fix that. And I wish it did. I wish it were that simple, but we can get physical symptoms from other things in our life that have nothing to do with diet.
Sleep and stress are probably greater factors than even diet. And with one night's missed sleep or interrupted sleep through the night, you can become more insulin sensitive the following day, and I mean have pre-diabetic markers just from lack of sleep. And so the stress is definitely a huge one. You have another book out there, and this is gonna be a horrible transition, but I do want to cover this because we don't have a whole lot of time left. But you do have another book out there called The Stall Slayer, and a lot of people are in that situation where they've done their diet for so long and they hit a stall, and many people just keep trying to either head on and do what they were doing before and still maintain that stall, or some people will completely give up and go back and have worse outcomes. You have worked with a lot of people that have had stalls, and you work to change factors and adapt things to help people get out of these stalls. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your book, some different causes of stalls. This could be its own episode altogether, but we want to go over it briefly because I want people to know this book is out there and this is a resource that they can get.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the book is called The Stall Slayer. You can get it from stallslayer.com as a PDF, or it is on Amazon if you want a Kindle or a paperback. But this is one of the top reasons people come to me for help. Why am I not losing weight? And so instead of typing out the same email response 800 times, I just said, you know what? I'm just going to put it all in one place and you can just get the book. And it is about breaking stalls and different things you can try and things that are probably getting in the way of you continuing to lose fat. But it's also a refresher on how keto works and what it's really all about. Do you have to use MCT oil? Do you have to drink a Fatty Joe, or can you just have, a little bit of cream in it? Like, all these different, again, these overcomplications. So it's, even if you're not stuck in a fat loss stall, the book is still a good basic reminder of the general principles of how it works and just what, I don't know what to do. But the two most common things that I see is too many carbs. Just people don't realize quite how much carbohydrate they're eating. And not everybody needs a ketogenic diet. Some people can eat 80, 100 grams of carbs a day and be totally fine. But if you're not one of them, if you're somebody that really needs to be super low and you're only kind of lowish, a 20 or 30 gram difference could be the difference between you losing fat and not, and that doesn't usually come from, eating too much broccoli or too much eggplant. It's usually people eating the keto ice cream and the keto bars and the keto, the treats that, again, some people can get away with this and still lose weight and some can't. And so I recommend counting total carbs instead of net carbs, because when you count the net carbs, which if you're new out there, that's the total carbohydrate in a product minus the grams of fiber and the grams of sugar alcohols. This is where you can get a product on a store shelf that says 2 grams net carbs, but it's got 30 grams total carbs. And so that's kind of a slippery slope. And then, or the stuff people, well, I'm keto all the time, except, on Friday we went out and I had the one piece of bread. Oh, and then Tuesday was the birthday party and I had a cupcake. You don't realize that these little onesie twosies, if you're someone that really needs to be low all the time, those little blips can make a big difference. And then the second biggest roadblock that I see, kind of goes hand in hand with the carbs, but I'll come back to that in a minute, is too much fat. And that surprises people because keto is a high fat diet, but it's not unlimited. And there's no such thing as hitting a fat macro. If I hear that phrase one more time, I'm going to smack somebody. Keto doesn't work through specific ratios or percentages. It works by keeping your carbs really, really low. That is what helps your body burn the fat. When there's not enough carbs, your body's going to burn fat instead. If you are eating way too much fat, then your body's going to burn all that fat. It has no reason to tap into your stored fat. So if you're adding gobs and gobs of oil and butter and cheese to everything in order to make your food more keto, you're probably going to be in a stall. And the kiss of death, that's especially bad when it's combined with that little carb creep where you're eating a ton of fat as if you're on a very, very strict ketogenic diet, but you're not, because your carbs are just a little too high and you've combined that with the fat. Now you're on a low-ish carb, super high fat diet, and that is the metabolic kiss of death. So, and that's what it is for most people, is just too much fat, because they've read somewhere, or their app is telling them that they haven't hit 80% fat yet for the day, so they add more fat. That's got to go. That's again, when I was new, none of that, nobody talked about macros, nobody talked about ratios. It was all about just keeping the carbs low.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get very confused on what a ketogenic diet actually is. There's many ways to be keto. It's a metabolic state. It isn't a specific food. It isn't a specific style of eating. It's any way of eating that puts you into a process where you're using ketones for fuel in the Krebs cycle and not carbs. And people will flip out online because they've been told this food isn't keto, and they see somebody using it in a recipe or something, and they're like, that's not keto. And they're like, well, I can maintain, you may not be able to, but I can maintain a ketogenic state and have a little bit of plum in some ice cream or something like that. Or it may bump me out of ketosis for a night, and then I go back into it, because that's how my body functions. If you are having more of an issue, you maybe need to be more strict. But I think people really lose sight. They get so dogmatic about their approaches that it becomes very challenging. Protein is another one. People say if you have too much protein, you're not going to lose weight because of gluconeogenesis. But yet we're seeing people on high protein diets maintain ketosis, increase lean mass, carnivore, for example, and lose the fat.
Yeah,
so,
I agree totally. Again, just like that, hitting the fat macro, that's not keto, is another phrase that I wish would die a painful death, because you're exactly right. Being ketogenic is your body is ketogenic. Your diet is not. Ketogenic literally means generating ketones. And your body is what does that, not the food on your plate. So there's no such thing as a food that is or is not keto. I've heard Dr. Westman say bread is keto if you eat that much of it, right?
Right.
So it's keto is whatever you can eat that still keeps you in a ketogenic state, or in even a low carb. I use the word keto a lot because that's what everybody says now, and that's what people search for. But I so much prefer the phrase low carb. I don't even like the abbreviation LCHF, low carb, high fat, because that gives equal emphasis to the low carb and the high fat. Well, what most people really just need is the low carb. They don't need to add more fat than they were already eating. What they need to do is take away the carbs. So I much prefer the phrase low carb, but Yeah, the protein thing, I see a lot of people adding more fat because they're hungry, but they're afraid to eat more protein, which is that's got to go. Protein is not. There may be some situations like really, really severe diabetes where at first you want to limit the protein while you're in the process of getting healthier and then kind of increase it over time. I've heard, stories from people that that's been the case. But for most people, if your main goal is just losing weight, protein is your friend.
Yeah, I say we start a new term, adaptive keto.
Yeah, I like it.
There
Yeah.
we go. So you've got an incredible history of working with people, and we've talked about the stalls from the diet, but there's also other factors that create stalls that are very common. I was on the truck, and on the truck, I got exposed to a lot of toxic chemicals through air pollutants. People would park next to me with their generator running. I'd get gas fumes, diesel fumes flowing through my truck. Chemicals I was in contact every day with, and I've noticed that I had about a year and a half long stall, and I started dropping weight again. And one thing I would notice is as I would drop fat, my skin would break out. I was losing sequestered toxins, and every time my skin broke out, I would hit another stall. So I know in your book you talk a little bit about quite a bit about some other factors of stalls, and toxicity is one of them. What are some other factors besides, toxicity as well, but what are some other factors that are really common that play a role in people stalling out?
Probably the biggest one I see after the food itself, too many carbs or too much fat, is undiagnosed or improperly treated hypothyroidism.
Oh,
I
wow.
think it's I think it's wildly underdiagnosed, but I admit I have a biased sample size because the people coming to me are coming to me because keto's not working, right? If it was working, they wouldn't need my help. So I have a biased view because so many of the people coming to me are having problems. And it's mostly women. Men do get hypothyroidism, but it's way more common in women. And some of these people either don't know they have this, they just think they have all these weird, uncomfortable symptoms for no reason, or they're actually already on thyroid medicine, but they're not on the right dose or the right type. And so when I get a client that's on thyroid medicine, I always say, do you feel any better? Do you actually think this medicine is working for you? Or did you just check off all the same signs and symptoms you had before you started the medicine? And it's difficult because as a nutritionist, I can't change their medication. All I can do is give them information and they have to talk to their doctor. And I think proper treatment of thyroid issues is so hard to find. It's very difficult to find an endocrinologist who's open-minded and willing to help you experiment with different things. But that's one of the things I see. And for a lot of people, keto corrects thyroid problems. A lot of people come into it with a thyroid problem and they get better over time with keto. For some people, that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go ahead. We've gone for quite a while. I mean, I could sit here for the rest of the day and talk to you. You've got such a wealth of experience and knowledge behind you, and everything that it's talked about, I think, is really beneficial for people to hear. I do like to close the show out with 5 questions I like to ask my guests. There are 4 that are definitely common questions, but sometimes I adapt a couple of them based on the guest. They're short answer questions, so they're pretty simple, and they're designed to give people resources or to show consensus in thinking for health issues such as food and things. So my first question is always, who are your top 5 health heroes?
My top 5 health heroes: Dr. Ted Naiman. Who else do I like? I like a lot. Dr. Kalajian, and he's a bit controversial. He's got a gruff personality, but he's a teddy bear on the inside, and he's helping a ton of people. I like Dr. Westman for keeping it really simple, and I could name two names, but other than that, the people, the non-professionals who've lost those, Tyler Cartwright from Keto Gains, he's lost like double what I've ever even weighed. You know, he's lost, I think, over 250 pounds. I mean, I've weighed more than half of that, but he's lost well over 200 to 250 pounds. He's helping a ton of people now. So the people that have been through their own transformation that are now using their experience to help other people. So
that's awesome. That's okay. Yeah, the main reason for that question is because it gives people somebody to look up and go, oh, well, who's this person? And,
oh, you know, if I give a fifth, it'll be Dr. Robert Cywes, CYWES. Yeah, he's on YouTube.
Yeah, I've seen some of his videos out there. And my next question are, what are the top 3 foods that you think everybody should avoid?
Ooh. Liquid sugar, so like juice, soda, sugar sweetened beverages. Other than that, just garbage, abject garbage, that maybe especially garbage masquerading as health food, like granola bars that are literally 1 ounce of food and it's got 30 grams of sugar. So number 3, that's I don't know. Garbage is such a big class. I can just say sugary garbage, but that's, I don't know. Oh, I mean, that's so individual. Yeah, just.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there, my next question are there 3 foods that you think everybody should include in their diet if accessible and not reactive to them?
That's a good question. This is an entirely individual thing because on keto, there's no one specific food that you must eat. Like, because I could say grass-fed beef. If you just don't like the way beef tastes, that's a bad answer for you. Have chicken instead, you know. For me personally, I do love beef. I love it in pretty much any form. I get canned salmon from a company called Vital Choice that is just the most delicious salmon I've ever had. Yeah. And yeah, that's such an individual taste thing. Maybe people say organ meat because it's so nutritious. I'm not going to lie. I don't like organ meat. I'm never going to tell anyone that they have to eat liver because I don't eat liver. Yeah, I would grass-fed beef if you can get it and you like it. Wild-caught salmon if you can get it and you like it. Other than that, whatever you like. Lamb is also delicious, probably even a little more nutrient dense than beef. So if you don't mind the gamey funk of lamb, have fatty lamb.
Yeah, we do a lot of lamb here, and I do enjoy it. Lamb is also very high in carnitine. It's one of the highest meats in carnitine, which is great for metabolism.
I try to stock up when it's on sale. Lamb is a little pricey.
It can be, depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
I've actually found that driving across the country, that there's a lot of Walmarts that are now selling it, and grass-fed too, and even conventional lamb is pretty much grass-fed.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of like big feedlots for lamb yet, so lamb is usually mostly grass.
Yeah. So I've been finding quite a bit of lamb at even Walmarts, and I find too, if you're on a budget, shopping later at night and hitting those manager specials.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to go if you're on a budget. Now, my next question is if there is a nutrition myth that you could get rid of overnight, what would it be?
That red meat is bad for you. It is not bad for you.
You know, that's what most of the people have responded with so far on that question. I think that's the biggest.
My second thing would have been that saturated fat is bad for you, but those kind of go hand in hand because people associate beef with saturated fat. If I had to choose a number 2, it would be that protein is bad for the kidneys.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you already have a current kidney issue, red meat and protein is not going to, as long as your kidneys are functioning properly in the first place, you're going to be all right. So my final question is, with the medical healthcare system, if there is something that you could alter about it, something that you could change to be more beneficial, what would that be?
Huh. Where do you start? I guess, wow, there's so much. Change. Maybe make doctors sit through support group meetings of people that have various conditions that they are trying to help or treat. Get, intimate, not like sexually intimate, but like intimate knowledge wise with what these people are really going through.
That's a
Don't
really
just
good
read,
one.
well, my textbook said you have this condition, here's your pill. Like that's not medicine. A monkey could do that. If all you have to do is like an algorithm could do that. Why are you spending 4 years in medical school and residency and internship? Why are you going through all of this stuff to do what a computer program could do? I want a human being to help me. I want someone to, like I said, with the endocrinologist, help me experiment, help me find the right drug that's going to work for me. That's what I would want. The human, bringing humanity back into medical care.
That is an awesome one. I have not heard anybody say that one before. That is really cool. That's not even one that I've thought of before. That's cool.
I mean, I could have said a million other things, teach keto in medical school, but that's.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that, and I've heard a few like more nutrition classes in medical school.
I worry about that because what kind of nutrition are they going to learn?
One person said they wanted to see more health coaches paired with doctors.
Yeah.
And so that's a good one. It's a perspective I don't think many people have thought of. That's awesome. So we're going to go ahead and close things out, and I want to give you a chance to let people know where to find you, how to track you down, where to send the smoke signals, or pigeon with a note on his foot.
Yeah, my main website is tuitnutrition.com, TUIT, tuitnutrition.com. Both of my books are on Amazon, the Alzheimer's Antidote and the Stall Slayer. And I'm on Twitter. My handle is tuitnutrition. That's also the name of my YouTube channel. And I have a book coming out later this year, actually written with Dr. Westman. It's called End Your Carb Confusion, and it is available for pre-order on Amazon. So you can check that out, End Your Carb Confusion. And I think that's about it. Those are all my handles.
Awesome. Yeah, and I definitely recommend that you pick up Amy Berger's books. They're incredibly beneficial. And if you have somebody that you're worried about their brain health, definitely check out the Alzheimer's Antidote. And if you are suffering from stalls, get the Stall Slayer as well while they're out. They are fantastic resources. All right, everybody. Well, I had a lot of time to listen to audiobooks and read on the truck. So, in my opinion, if you're a truck driver, you should be one of the most well-educated people out there. So, there's so many resources for you to tap into. But we're going to go ahead and close out now. I want to thank everybody for listening to the Fatty Joe Show, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Fatty Joe Show. Be sure to leave a comment and subscribe. It helps the show reach more people. To support the show, as well as Carrie Brown and Yogi's work on the blog, keto recipe development, masterclasses, and to gain access to private Facebook groups and other awards, go to patreon.com/thefattyjoeshow or patreon.com/Carrie Brown. Also, check out our Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker YouTube channel for video versions of the Fatty Joe Show, recipe videos, and more. Join our awesome community on the Facebook group, The Keto Kitchen with Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker, and check out our carriebrown.com website for recipes, blog posts, discounts, cookbooks, masterclasses, and other great stuff. Thank you so much.